Great film, eh?
Another round of applause. I'm going to ask the director, Sarah Fodey, producer, Han Yunin, and if there are any survivors from the LGBTQ purge who are here in the crowd tonight who would like to be recognized to come down to the front as well. Maybe a minute, see if there's anybody else coming down. I think we've got one more person coming down. And excellent. So before we introduce everybody else, Sarah Fodey beside me here in her 21-year career as a film and television writer and producer, she has produced multiple feature films and documentary series. Her current projects include Noël en Boîte, a Telefilm Canada feature film, season 7 of Canori, APTN's hit scripted youth series, and of course The Fruit Machine. This is her directorial debut, so excellent welcome. Thank you for being This is Han Yunin over here, and I'm just going to give the microphone to you and to you if you wouldn't mind, if you'd like to introduce yourselves to the crowd.
Hi, I'm Wayne Davis. I'm here because I know so many people from that film. Sorry, I know people from the film because I work with them as a result of the apology. I am a person that was purged from the RCMP in 1986, and I'm here today because of the power of these people. I let it slip. I didn't feel I had the courage to fight back then, and to be able to, 30 years later, have the opportunity to do something about this, make sure it doesn't happen again through some work that I'm doing with these great folks, is why I'm trying to keep together to stand up here and say it's important to not forget what happened. Because in the film, someone said you can be a minority again, it can go full circle, and it's really important to make sure that doesn't happen. And this film is a fantastic tool to educate people on what can happen if we're not diligent.
Thank you.
My name is Darcy Goche. I was released 1st of May 1991. This is really hard for me. I cried about things. It's just, me and Mark Sellows, we actually have a very similar experience being investigated and kicked out, only I was married at the time. Went through a divorce, which then prompted the 6th Regiment in Kingston to start an investigation on me because they thought, well, why are you divorcing your wife? So they attacked my children in the school yard at my oldest son.
Welcome, Wayne. Welcome, Darcy. Sorry for the feedback. Maybe we'll start off and we'll ask you, Sarah and Han, a couple of questions. Sarah, this is your directorial debut, although you've long been a writer and a producer, and I'm wondering why this was the film that you were gonna, that was to be your first directorial venture.
I think it was just it was a story that I had trouble believing myself that it happened. I thought that I was a well-informed Canadian that knew the history of the LGBTQ plus community, but then when I learned of the story over 16 years ago, it just it got under my skin, and it just got under my skin, and I couldn't stop thinking about it. And the more people, I go to dinner parties and speak to people and say, did you know about the fruit machine? Did you know that there was this, scientific device that would try to unearth, homosexuals? And everybody thought, I was crazy and had one too many. So it just became this project that I researched for many years. And of course, meeting these remarkable men and women, we were just driven to raise the financing to make this happen.
Yeah, just to add, I was one of those people at the dinners who did not believe the story, which is how I got involved about 9 years ago. Sarah, you started this about 15 years ago. And it was incredibly shocking and just made us very angry, I think. Yeah. And I want to say that this is, I'm incredibly proud when we're able to screen any queer film here at the film festival, but this is one of the films that really touches me deeply and makes me feel really happy to know that this is what we do and this is what we're able to screen. And I'm wondering what what has been the reaction to your film so far from the public, from survivors, maybe we can hear from a couple, but and also the government. I didn't see any government officials in the film, and I would love to hear a little bit about that too.
Sure. I'll address your last point first. We did our due diligence, and we did try to unearth some people from the government, from the military, from the RCMP, but we did not have any cooperation. No one wanted to come forward and to be in the documentary, which was unfortunate. But the reception has been incredibly powerful. We're humbled by the response to this film every time we have the opportunity to share it. I think one of the most surprising reactions that we've had is we've had invitations from the Canadian Public Service, from the Canadian Armed Forces, from CSIS. So they are engaging in conversations with us now to take the film across the country, to use it as an educational tool, and for us that's why we so happy.
Have you gotten any political reaction from the film? Has anyone within the political ranks, the special advisor, Brandy Boissonneau to LGBTQ+ issues, or the Prime Minister himself, or anyone else within the federal government had a reaction to the film?
Actually, I think being in beautiful Vancouver brought us some amount of luck or good fortune, because just yesterday we received a call from the PMO's office, and they are interested in having a private screening of the film. Wow. And looking at different ways that they can help, again, just further propagate the message and again, to use it as a training and educational tool moving forward.
The film is so well made, and the courage of all of the participants in the film, the ones that made it to screen and the ones that didn't, that participated, it's staggering and really impressive. I'm going to open it up to the audience, and I will try to get microphones to you, and if not, I will repeat your question.
Hi, thanks again for making this film. My name is Heidi, and I worked 22 years ago on the beginning of this project with Gary Kinsman, doing archival work and interviewing people. But my question is, it was interesting to me, was it because some of the older people are basically gone now, that you sort of focused all your interviews on lesbians from the later period? Did you have trouble getting the earlier groups from the civil service who were purged to speak to you, or was it some other kind of decision why you decided to put more of those people in this film?
Thank you for your work with Gary. Gary was an instrumental part in our research, so thank you for that very foundational work. We knew despite it taking almost 16 years to bring this story to life, we knew that the timeline, I mean, we really felt like we had a gun to our head to get this film financed, because as you see in the last frame with Leo, we were quickly losing many of those older stories. So really it was a product of age. Most of the campaign on the civil servant side was much more concentrated in the earlier decades. And then it shifted, the momentum and the focus shifted to the military. So that's why you see that difference. Do you have anything else on that?
Just the how you learned of the fruit machine in the first place. That was a very interesting encounter. Actually, go on and tell the story how you heard of it in the first place with having coffee with.
Yeah, I saw a little blurb in the Ottawa Citizen regarding this gentleman who was trying to raise the financing to open what would have been the first gay and lesbian retirement home in the country at that time. So I called him. I thought there might have been a story there. So we had a coffee, and it was through that discussion with George that I learned of the fruit machine and the Purge campaign. And at the time, he was trying to, he said, I'm having difficulty finding men and women who are going to be willing to be living in a brownstone, right, clad with a rainbow flag, because of course they went through this purge and had their sexuality driven underground. So we knew even from the beginning that even the research side, and that's why I was mentioning Gary's work was so foundational and important to us, because even trying to find men and women who would come forward and share their story was very difficult.
Are there any other questions? I see a couple of questions up at the top, and maybe if you want to shout it down and then I'll repeat it into the microphone. But we have a microphone coming up to you. Fabulous.
I'm at a loss. I love the film. I was what was called a military dependent, and from age 8 to age 11, I was in the care of a military social worker on CP Griesbach, because they had determined that I liked other boys. And so this wasn't just limited to military personnel. This type of witch hunt went on with everybody who lived on those bases. Did you hear any grumblings of that as you were doing your I guess background research for this film?
I did not, actually. Not me personally. I don't know if you remember anything like that, hon. And you know what? Thank you for saying that and for standing up, because I think one of the most surprising things for me personally is finding out all of these other realities, right? Anyway, I'm sorry that you went through that.
I also saw a question just down in front, yellow shirt. Jeremy.
Thanks, Stephanie. I'm just wondering how can the public access this film, please?
So, TVO was our wonderful broadcaster, so that is the Ontario Provincial Educational Broadcaster. They are our main broadcast partner. They will be premiering the film on television and streaming online at the end of September. And in addition to that, we continue to share it with audiences like this, thanks to wonderful festivals like Stephanie's. So hopefully you'll see it at other festivals and also online and on broadcast.
I think I saw another question way up on the top on the other side.
Thank you. I was very, very moved by that film. When I was a university student in the early 70s at Queen's University in Kingston, I had an older friend who was in the military, based there. And over the course of our friendship during the 3 years I was at Queen's, he was bounced out of the armed forces for being gay. And the impact that had on me was that I decided not to pursue a career with the Foreign Service because I didn't want to put myself through that.
Thank you for sharing your story. I'd love to tell you that that's the first time we've heard something like that, but sadly it's not. I think a lot of people, even if they weren't directly impacted by being purged from the military or the public service, they were certainly affected deeply and greatly by experiences of those in their own family and in their friendship circles. So sadly, there's many individuals like yourself.
And so, Sarah, maybe I can ask you and Han, how long did the film take to make, and was it challenging in any unique ways, or maybe there were some things that enabled it in some ways?
As we mentioned before, the Sarah started this baby about 16 years ago, and through that, the biggest challenge I think was going through the research and trying to find participants who were willing to share their stories with us, because often we found that they were sharing their story for the first time, like even their families didn't know about it, and really just establishing that trust, because who are we, just two yahoos wanting to ask all these very intimate questions. That was one of the biggest challenges. The second one, which I find a little bit serendipitous now that I think about it, was the trying to get a broadcaster on board and getting it funded, because we got turned down quite a few times over the years, and I think that finally, thanks to TVO, they took a chance on the film, and it just so happened that as we were wrapping up filming, that the apology was happening. So it just became, like I said, serendipitous. I think those were the two biggest ones, but at this point, it's just the tip of the iceberg. I think now that the film is out and it's getting a lot more coverage, more and more people want to approach us and tell us their stories. So we're starting to unearth so many other stories that's part of the purge. So we're definitely going to be continuing the project in some shape or form, so that hopefully it becomes part of the educational system.
Wonderful. Are there any other? Yeah, thank you. Pass it to you.
Thank you so much for making this film. While so many things have changed in the last few decades, I think that it continues to be important in the current climate, and I think especially a lot of young, straight men today feel a need to protect themselves, perhaps the ways that queer, gay, bi men and women and people of all genders would have felt decades ago. And so even for people who aren't queer or two-spirit, they might feel like they're being policed or needing to prove, especially for men, their masculinity in problematic, toxic, sometimes violent ways to keep away the threat that they might be perceived as queer or trans. And I'm wondering if there's been any work to find ways that the fruit machine would connect to other ways that the Canadian government and armed forces and public service have negatively impacted people on this land that is, I'm wondering if work around the intersections of who we are and the challenges that the Canadian government has in us feeling safe and being able to live and have our needs met.
I think that's an important question, right? And thanks for asking that. And I think we're inspired by the response that we're getting from those government and military departments, that they do have a willingness, right, and an open ear to using this film in some small way to actually engage their own members, their own groups, reaching out to the community on that level, and having those very important conversations. As John Sawatsky says in the film so so beautifully, far more beautifully than I could repeat. But just that notion of being vigilant, right? I don't think anybody looks at this as something that's completely in the past and that the door is shut. I think it's simply just, it's a new tool to further those conversations.
Thanks. So we probably have time for one more audience question. Does anybody else have a question? Right up there.
Hi, my name is Stan Moore, and my husband Pierre Soucy is with me. We were somewhat fortunate that in 1990 I was in the diplomatic service and posted to Indonesia. And I decided at that time to take my partner with me and to declare him publicly as my partner, which meant I had to go through the clearance that you saw. And I was rather fortunate because by that time, I think they had exhausted themselves in the purging process, and things were already shifting. However, in 1991, I applied for the spousal benefits and expenses of my spouse to be paid. It was very expensive to relocate yourself across the world like that. And there was a new provision in the collective agreement for foreign service officers, which said there would be no discrimination in any of the terms of the collective agreement based on sexual orientation. On that basis, we applied and were turned down. When we asked them to explain why, they said that was not the intent of that clause. And so we then took the federal government to the Human Rights Commission, and after that the Human Rights Tribunal, and after that the federal court. It took from 1991 until 1998 for our case to be totally heard. That was in part because ours was selected as the case study for all of Canada. And during that period, they suspended all other cases until ours was decided. The ruling ultimately came out in 1996, contrary to what your film said at the end. In 1996, the Human Rights Tribunal granted, on our behalf, granted recognition of same-sex partnerships throughout the federal government, the military, and the RCMP, and as a consequence, then gave benefits. But in 1998, because the government wanted to create a new category called same-sex partners and would not let us use the term spouse, we then went back to the higher court, to the federal court, and charged the government with continued discrimination because they were categorizing us, and we just wanted to be called common law spouses. As a consequence, the federal court ordered the government to cease and desist using a traditional definition of spouse henceforth in all laws. They went further and ordered the government to change 84 laws and regulations that discriminated against gays. And they confirmed that as of 1996, all people, public servants, the RCMP, and military would then be granted same-sex or spousal benefits, the same as others. That was a landmark watershed. That was only possible because of the tragedies that we saw that went before us. And I still remember in 1990 when I had to fill out this rigorous form giving all my relatives, and I put Pierre as my #1 relative as my common law partner. I still remember waiting a month for the RCMP to get hold of me and for the two burly men to come in and take me away to be questioned. And it never happened. So I phoned, and I had a very sympathetic woman on the other end who I'm sure was lesbian, but never mind. And I asked her, I said, "Did you receive my form?" And she said, "Yes, we did." And I said, "Well, did you want me to come in to answer questions?" And she said, "No, unless you want to." And I said, "Well, I just thought, because I'm gay, that you'd want to." And she said, "No. What we've discovered is that if you're gay and you're comfortable with that and you are out, you are not a security risk. The risks that we have are with married men who are hiding the fact that they're having an affair." So I find it remarkable to see how quickly things can shift. And I tell this story just to say that you never know when the breaking point comes, that even with all that years and years of persecution, at one point, if you don't give up, they give in. And we must be reminded of that and be vigilant.
Thank you. Thank you. We've actually run out of time. I'm sorry, Barbara. I see you up there. But I want to say a big thank you again to Sarah Fodey and Han Nguyen, as well as to Wayne and to Darcy for coming and being seen. We see you, we recognize you, and we honor you for what you've been through. And I think we all promise to go away and have conversations with other people who don't get more about this. Thank you. And if you're And so thank you all so much. And if you're staying for the next film, you can stay in your seats and a volunteer will come around. And I'm sure that these lovely folks will hang out outside the theater and would love to continue to chat with you. Thank you.
You can go ahead.